I call the honourable member Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Marion Street. Age is a matter of fact, and there's not much I can do about that, but beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, yeah, that's just the way it goes. Mr Chair, you have deemed that this debate on Clause 1 ought to be a wide-ranging debate, given the fact that this bill has not been to Select Committee and that submitters have not had the opportunity to have their say, and it is our duty as members of Parliament to do our best to represent the interests of those submitters. However, Clause 1 is, of course, the title clause, and it's customary for the opposition to suggest some amendments and possible alternatives to the title of this bill, which actually doesn't tell us very much. Folks up in the gallery might have been told that we're debating the New Zealand Public Health and Disability Amendment Bill number 2. And I bet they thought that tells me absolutely nothing. I've got no idea what that bill will be about. So I have got a few suggestions for the government, sir. My first suggestion is the pulling the wool over the eyes of people with disabilities bill, because that's essentially what this does. The government was full of promises. They were going to fix the problem that carers who are looking after family members who had a disability were now going to be able to be paid. That's what the government said. That's what they told people in the disability sector they were going to do. And people out there believed them. Unfortunately, it's rather unfortunate that they chose to believe the government, because not the most trustworthy government we've ever seen, but people out there believed Tony Ryle when he said, we are going to comprehensively deal with the issues raised in that court case that was settled a year ago. And in fact, of course, what we know is that's not the case at all. That's absolutely not the case at all. The government had 3 options. Well, actually, it had 9 options when you, as Marion Street said, you put the matrix together of the options of targeting and how the employment relationship will actually work. And they chose the one that kind of just about does enough to appease people, just about does enough to maybe just try to pull the wool over people's eyes, but certainly doesn't go the whole way. It certainly doesn't answer the whole problem. So I would call this the pulling the wool over the eyes of people with disabilities bill, sir. Another name for it is doing half the job and taking away people's rights bill. That's it. Because, as I've said, it does about half the job. Actually, I think doing half the job is kind of generous. It doesn't really quite get to doing half the job. It does maybe about a third of the job, because this will in fact affect about 1,600 people with disabilities, not the 5,400 people that it should cover, that if the job was being done properly it would cover all those people. But it's doing, not even half the job, but let's call it doing half the job and then taking away people's rights. And I think actually that second part is possibly one of the most abysmal parts of this bill, because even the Attorney General, Chris Finlayson, says that this bill is not up to scratch. He points out in his report that new Section 70E prevents the Human Rights Commission from taking any further action in relation to a complaint made after the 16th of May 2013. And if members look up on the wall, it says that it's the 16th of May. That's one of those weird things about Parliament. It's actually the 17th. But that means that anybody who lays a complaint from yesterday onwards, or just doesn't have the right or the ability to lay a complaint. However, of course, any complaints made before the 16th of May, well, they can be preceded. And that creates an inequity. That is a discrimination, sir. And it's a discrimination that the Attorney-General says is not acceptable. He says that new Section 70E appears to limit the right to judicial review because it would prevent a person from challenging the lawfulness of a decision on the basis that it was inconsistent with Section 19(1) of the Bill of Rights Act. And there you have it right there. It contravenes the Bill of Rights Act, and therefore this legislation is wrong. It's discriminatory. And as Catherine Delahunty said, it's deeply ironic that a bill the minister promoted to people as being something that would remove discrimination actually creates a new form of discrimination. So I would call this bill doing half the job and taking away people's rights. I think the one that the Minister would probably want to title it is the "Gosh, I hope no one looks at this too closely" bill. Because when you get down to it, you actually realise what this does. And that's probably why the Minister did not want it to go to Select Committee. That's why he did not want, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman, Mr Chairman.
I call the honourable member Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I was talking about why you would want to call this bill the "Gosh, I hope no one looks at this too closely" bill. Because the Minister did not want this to go to Select Committee, because he did not want people who are directly affected by this bill to get a chance to give it the proper scrutiny that it deserves. But we have already started hearing back from the sector, because people are looking at this bill because they want to know what the impact will be on them. And people are telling us that initially, they thought the Minister was getting the job done, just as the Minister wanted it to happen. He wanted the politics to work out on this, but then when they looked at it, they peeled the layers away from the onion, they looked at it a bit more closely, they realised what was wrong with this bill. And they are outraged that this bill says that family members who care for people with disabilities will be paid less than people in the sector.
Member. The time has come for the meal break. Honourable members, the House stands suspended until 2 p.m. when I shall resume the chair. Haere rā, ka kite anō, good afternoon.